Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. It was an excellent lunch. Jean-Michel, thanks so much. We are going to start this third session with the title that I think it's very interesting, well framed, challenging, changing models, changing roles. Sometimes in life it's more difficult to change the role than the model, even though the model comes ex ante. But it obliges everybody to be attentive of the new realities and to know under what would be the most important references to have in this new sailing. So for that purpose, we have a new group of experts in the table, but first we are going to listen a message that has been sent to ourselves from the Director General of Energy of the European
Jean-Michel,
Commission.
Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to this workshop on local governance for a transnational energy transition. Unfortunately, I could not be with you today, having to stay in Brussels for interinstitutional reasons. But I am very glad that you have dedicated today's event to the role of local authorities. Indeed, local authorities and cities will play a decisive role in the success of a clean energy transition. With a clean energy transition, the energy system is going through profound changes, characterized by the three major trends of decarbonization, decentralization, and digitalization. Indeed, the share of renewables is growing rapidly. With a 17.5% share in 2017, the EU is well on track to meet its 2020 target and has set, as you know, an ambitious target at EU level by 2030 of at least 32%. Today, already over 30% of electricity produced in Europe is coming from renewables. And it is expected that 53% of the electricity will be coming from renewables by 2030, I mean tomorrow. This is good news, as it means a greater use of electricity in the energy mix in the context of a clean energy transition. It is expected that the share of electricity in the EU final energy consumption will more than double by 2050, due in particular to the increasing role of electricity in other strategic sectors, such as transport, industry, and heating and cooling. At the same time, with the deployment of renewables, the energy system is becoming more decentralized. This calls for changes in the way we build and operate our energy systems. It also calls for innovative solutions, such as digital technologies, to make the energy system more flexible, smarter, and better adapted. All these developments change the way our electricity system works and allow for new actors, in particular at local level, to play a more active role and to be at the heart of a clean energy transition. With the rollout of smart metering system, smart home, and the continuing deployment of information and communication technologies, new services are becoming available, even for the smaller consumers. And consumers themselves are more and more interested to become active players. Last year, we concluded the negotiation on the Clean Energy for All Europeans package, which puts forward the most advanced regulatory framework to achieve a clean energy transition, to modernize our energy system while putting consumers at the heart of the energy transition. The package will facilitate the transformation of our electricity system, including at local level, and allows consumers' participation in the market. Probably for the first time, the role of active consumers is recognized on an equal footing in the market, either individually or collectively with energy communities. Consumers are now able individually or collectively to produce, to consume, to store, or to sell their own electricity. And we already see a great interest for such communities to participate in the energy market. For instance, in Spain, Some Energy, Portugal, Copernico, Belgium, EcoPower, or France, REScoop, but also the European Federation of Group and Cooperative of Citizens for Renewables, Energy Efficiency and E-Mobility, regrouped in REScoop EU. Smart meters and the establishment of new players and new services in the market, such as aggregators and demand response, will also provide flexibility to the system. And this will benefit to consumers who will be able to save money on their energy bills. Accordingly, with a Clean Energy for All European package, the role of local actors is being reinforced, and this implies a new governance where local actors, regional authorities and citizens can contribute and own the clean energy and fair energy transition. This is why, for the first time, the new energy governance in Europe, based on an European regulation, puts also EU citizens as well as local government and stakeholders in the political debate on the clean and fair energy transition. It is important that we bring on board all actors in a coordinated way, including local, regional and national authorities. This is absolutely key for a successful clean and fair energy transition. As you know, local communities and cities play a pivotal role as they represent more than 75% of the EU population and therefore the biggest share of consumers in Europe. The EU has therefore launched several initiatives to promote urban solutions and to help cities to become smarter and healthier places to live in order to accelerate the energy transition on local level. For example, the Covenant of Mayors, with now over 9,000 signatories, regrouping pioneer cities in the development of clean energy solutions that are closer to the citizens and fully in line with the EU energy and climate objective. But also the European Innovation Partnership on Smart Cities and Communities and its matchmaking process, which already triggered investment of more than €1 billion. Under Horizon 2020, the EU directly brings together cities that lead the way in technological innovation. The so-called Lighthouse Project, with 40 lighthouses and 53 fellow cities representing approximately €300 million of EU funding. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to stress the importance of having local actors fully involved in the clean and fair energy transition. Because it is at local level that the benefits of the clean energy transition will be the most tangible. And I am glad that today's initiative in Florence is also aiming at developing a proposal to provide the necessary training to all decision makers and stakeholders in order to ensure that local authorities are fully on board and part of this new governance. I am wishing to you all fruitful and very interesting discussions today.
Yes. Yes, I fully agree with you. I think it was a very complete, difficult and complete, in a few minutes, panorama of the strategies, objectives, and even figures, and underline the main actors that the Director General for Energy of the European Commission, Dominique Ristori, consider are going to take part on this energy transition initiative. So one of the local partners, as Dominique was emphasizing, are one of the main actors would be the local ones. So we are very happy to welcome today some of them on this table. Unfortunately, we cannot count because it couldn't join finally to this workshop Rémy Garaude-Verdier from Enedis, but we have another three coming from the university, from the cooperatives world, and from the social movements And we are very happy to have all you here today this afternoon. We are going to start with Joshua Roberts, that is from REScoop. Scoop means not only this word that is something new that you are going to provide us as a piece of information, perhaps yes, but it also it has the meaning, at least the double meaning of cooperatives. So, Josh, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vincent. Yeah, it's too bad Dominique is not here. I would like to thank him for his intervention in person, but yes, business goes on in Brussels. So my name is Josh Roberts. I'm the Advocacy Officer for REScoop EU. And before getting into my presentation, I would just like to sort of paint a picture for you all in your minds, just exactly what we see the existing potential is for citizens to get involved in the energy transition. In 2015, we had a study conducted by CE Delft to assess what is the potential of citizen energy. We had this study conducted to input into the Commission's preparations of its clean energy package. They said, if we're going to put a framework in place at EU level, we need to understand what the impact is going to be. So we said, okay, we will demonstrate this. And the conclusions of that study are that by 2050, around 45% of renewable energy production can be owned by citizens. And if you extrapolate that down into different categories, around 37% of that 45% could come through participation in a cooperative. Now, when you're talking about in terms of public acceptance or local investment, this is all, these are quite significant numbers. Of course, we go even further. We think that empowering citizens to take control of their energy futures and their lives is important in itself, and giving people a meaningful role in the energy sector is a goal in itself. But an even more interesting number that often gets overlooked in this study is that when you go past renewable energy, meaning you look at storage, flexibility, the number goes to about 83%. So by 2050, 83% of citizens could be involved in the energy sector. So here we are talking about a very significant amount of the EU population being a central role and solution to this whole process that we are embarking on. So with that picture painted, I will just give you a little bit of I'll paint another picture for you, because most people don't really know who REScoop EU is. Before the Commission proposed its package at the end of 2016, nobody knew who we are. So the calls started coming in early 2017 saying, what are these new provisions on renewable and local energy communities? I'll mention why I put those in parentheses in a bit. But what are you and what do you want? And so I will tell you, and before getting into it from a technological perspective or based on the activities, because there are many activities you can engage in the energy sector, I'll even step back a little bit and describe what it really is that we are at the core. And essentially what we are is we are a different type of market actor. We are a different way to do business in the energy sector. And that different way to do business is very much based on citizens coming together to express themselves and to cooperate in different activities throughout the energy sector through a type of business model that really emphasizes democratic decision-making and empowering the citizens as consumers, but also as citizens to take care of their needs, whether that is local or for the members themselves. And this is very much based, of course, on the cooperative business model. And we take what we call the International Cooperative Alliance principles quite seriously. These are the principles that we integrate into our business model that make us different from your traditional for-profit commercial market actors. And this has a lot of different challenges. For instance, on return on investment, there are a lot of national laws that limit this. Cooperatives operate themselves according to distinct decision-making procedures, and indeed a lot of these projects are quite local. So there are a plethora of challenges that are associated with doing different things, which I'll get into. But so before, I just wanted to put that front and center. When it comes to activities, though, you have cooperatives that have and are beginning to do pretty much anything that anybody else does. So in terms of activities, I wouldn't say it's a revolutionary thing. For instance, a lot of us might not know, but distribution networks throughout Europe, a lot of those going back to the early 1900s, late 1800s, were literally developed by cooperatives. We would just call these a consumer-owned network, whether it's district heating or power. And some of those networks have remained in the hands of those users, of the citizens, up until this very day. I guess we would call these older generation cooperatives. Now, moving a little bit forward to the 1970s, where you have a lot of crises that are starting to affect Europe, the oil crisis, energy crises, and a lot of government's response to this has been to, increase internal energy security. And for instance, Denmark wanted to go for nuclear. Now, people who know Denmark's constitution know that nuclear is actually banned. And the reason that is because the citizens actually just revolted and they said, no, we don't want nuclear to be in our future. We want renewables. And what they did was they said, we don't just want this, we're going to do it. So they literally built the first wind turbines in Denmark in the 1970s, and they did this together through cooperatives. And this has been a very attractive activity. So most of our members, I don't have concrete numbers, but I would say around 80 to 85% of our members are traditionally developing small local renewable energy generation projects. But it doesn't stop there. Energy efficiency is also a very strong motivating factor. A lot of people want to adopt a more rational and energy sober lifestyle. And so we have energy cooperatives that focus on providing energy efficiency services to their members. Nostra is an example. Sarah is sitting over there. And this also relates to other socioeconomic objectives of these cooperatives. It can be to address energy poverty and help people reduce their energy bills. These are a lot of small interventions that have real impacts. I think when we're moving forward, also, a lot of our members are getting involved in, now that you have electric vehicles, we have electric vehicle car sharing cooperatives coming into the fore. People are interested in getting in demand response, flexibility. We have members that are experimenting with virtual power plants, bringing different cooperatives together to provide energy services, ESCOs, pretty much you name it. And all of this, again, goes back to the purpose of why they start, which is to address local needs. A lot of our members see renewables as the low-hanging fruit to invest in other local needs, whether it's renovations of ports or renovating local buildings or investing in flexibility. The limits are pretty much endless. And what we are seeing is, and this is a good intersection with the previous themes that have been explored earlier, and that is what we are now calling the municipality approach. And that is, we find that at the local level, the municipalities are our natural allies, are our natural partners. And historically, they have been there. They have mainly been providing an enabling policy framework at the local level, whether it's through technical assistance or just helping projects get approved and putting political signals behind these projects. These have been very important. But now, as municipalities are wanting to get more active, we are actually having more and more instances where they want to co-invest in projects. And so we are literally seeing these coalesce. And that brings me to one of the interesting opportunities and perhaps why we're even here at all, and that is the clean energy package. We've talked about the governance and the participation of different voices in that. But in terms of the market, our business model has not necessarily, it's either been overlooked or seen as kind of a threat. I don't know why, but a lot of bigger energy companies are somewhat threatened by us. I guess they see us as additional competition to all the other challenges they face. So our participation in the market we have certainly not taken this for granted. And you see, as renewables is being integrated into the markets, a lot of more market-based measures to support renewables. For instance, moving from feed-in tariffs to auctions and tenders. This has put a very downward pressure on the ability of these small local projects to actually enter into the market. And as you can see already in Germany, the number of new community energy projects has dwindled due to new tenders. They actually tried to take into account citizen energy projects, but they sort of botched it. And so now everybody's sort of scratching their heads on what to do. But that is why we are very excited about the new clean energy package, because very importantly, first, it acknowledges these types of business actors. Like I said, this isn't anything revolutionary, but the fact is they've been completely overlooked until now. So the fact that you now have this acknowledgement, it means that you can put in place some support measures to make sure that these, now they call them energy communities, are staying in the landscape. And so you have actually two definitions. You have a renewable energy community, and now I use my quotation marks again, citizens energy community. And I would just like to sort of plant a flag in the sand and wish the word local energy community a nice goodbye, because it exists in the archives of European legislative history. It's not a real term anymore. And this is really, I think, I guess the best way you could look at this is if you look at what I have just said and you look at the attributes of community energy projects that do differentiate themselves. Citizens energy communities could be seen as an umbrella definition, and renewable energy communities would more be a subset of that. I mean, there's a lot of issues. This is just one to be unpacked. So I don't want to waste my breath going through all of the issues. But I think now that we have this legislation in place, now we actually have to see how we implement that. And I think that brings us back to the governance. At the EU level, member states have already submitted their draft climate and energy plans. They're supposed to mention how the member states want to, at least in principle, or set objectives for supporting citizen energy. And I have not gone through the data myself. It's on my list of things to do, but from others that I've heard from, this has been completely overlooked. So we really face a sort of challenge in connecting the national will and ambition to the will and ambition that's already existing at the local level. And what we are already finding that the DSOs who didn't really like us, now they are coming to talk to us they are finally seeing that energy communities are not just another source of renewables to be put onto the grid, but there are actually citizens that want to take responsibility for integrating through flexibility, through reducing their use. And again, the cities and local authorities are coming to us and acting as partners every day. So I think in terms of what we need to unpack, there are very interesting opportunities. And one last point before I finish, I think this new integration of this concept, some of this for traditional proponents of a market-based approach might feel me going against the grain, but I think this new concept has added a level of fairness into the market. It's not just about cost effectiveness, about market approaches, but it's also about fairness and allowing people who will be affected by all of these decisions to actually have a stake and to take some ownership and be a part of the change that we all want them to be, that we want ourselves to be. And I think that is important, and it's something we will need to explore as we move forward. But I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Joshua. I think it was a very interesting presentation and explanations. I have just one question before leaving the floor to Holger. That is, how many members do you have across Europe?
Yeah, That's probably important too. Right now we have around 1,500 members representing around 1 million citizens. That is across 12 to, I think it's 12, 13 member states. I'm not sure. We just had a new member from Slovenia, so I don't know where that puts us. But that is generally, I think, the geographical context is important too, because most of our members tend to be in Northern and Western Europe. So Southern Europe, there is a lot less. I think the movement is growing in Italy now. So that is very interesting. In Greece, there's a new legislation on this. But in Eastern Europe, for the most part, these types of business models are very little to non-existent at all. So still a lot of potential there.
Thanks so much. Now we are going to pass the floor to Holger Schneidewindt. I don't know if I've made, it could be improved, no? That he has also a very interesting background in the international arena in different regions, a little bit far from Europe as Australia, but now is also serving in the University of Trento as a professor. No, as a professor. That's him. Yeah, it's so, and I give it to you, the floor. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Holger Schneidewindt, cut wind, tagliavento, whatever. It's easy, Holger Schneidewindt. I'm here probably on two accounts. The first account is that I'm an energy law expert at a consumer association in Germany since 2010, and looking and working on the rise of prosumers along the German energy transition, which is quite advanced. And the second account probably is that I've lived in Singapore 2 years, and I founded a project that's called Energy Democracy, and we're looking at prosumer regulations worldwide. That's the aim. We started because there are a lot of things taking place regarding prosumers. It was Australia is interesting, Asia is starting, the US is very interesting, and it's very interesting to compare. What do they, because they all have the same challenge. Integrate prosumers, the network tariffs. It's the same problem for everybody. Nobody has found the solution yet. So that's my background. The approach of this workshop is very comprehensive, very abstract, very complex, and covers a lot of consumer subjects, from its buildings, energy efficiency, its energy poverty, of course, a big subject, its contracts, electricity, gas, whatever that is. Then we have all the subjects covered by the Clean Energy Package, active consumers, jointly acting consumers, communities. Then we have the consumer group tenants, millions in the EU, very important, a huge potential for energy transition. That's a big one. And then we have not really direct subjects, but all regards coal phase out. Who pays that? Redispatch costs, the forced opening of national interconnectors costs a lot of money. Network codes for balancing energy, whatever that is, if that's not efficient, I pay it, you pay it, everybody pays it. That is not a direct consumer subject, but it's very important because, of course, we always pay it. If you don't know what to do, throw it in the consumer basket and we will pay it. It's always socialized. Okay. But my focus today, and maybe of this clean energy package, is the active consumer. Dominique Ristori said more or less, there are some core provisions in the clean energy package. One is Internal Market Directive, Article 15, active consumers. To generate, to store, to consume, to sell. And so that's the aim. Consumers, me, Jean-Michel, all of you, we shall do this. We shall be active consumers. Well, we have to know how. And then there, in the same directive, it's Article 17. It is demand response through aggregation. It includes this new market rule, aggregators, intermediaries, because I don't sell energy right now. I don't do it. I'm not active. Nobody of you probably is very active because we can't do it. It's too complex, too expensive. So we need intermediaries. We need aggregators, and that's a very interesting role. Maybe communities can be aggregators. They can do it. and they want to probably. So very interesting article. And then we move to the Renewables Directive, Article 21, renewables self-consumers. That's PV, more or less, photovoltaics, because the Commission knows the potential of active consumers to achieve energy and climate goals. It is, you read it in all the preambles. They don't, so talking about changing roles and the roles of consumers in the future energy world, they are supposed to be superheroes. So they are supposed to be doing everything, generate, store, demand response, the washing machine at night, even though I have 2 kids. I should do it when electricity is cheap. Okay, the good thing is, and I agree with Josh, the clean energy package is a big thing. It's very positive to the limit of what the Commission could have done, because it's directives. There is a lot of vague legal terms, opening a lot of room for member states who don't really like prosumers to do it their way and say, well, this is proportionate, this is non-discriminatory, this is cost-effective. And we might say, no, it's not, but they say it is. So, but there is a lot of tailwind. And the big question right now is, will the member states, having to transpose the directives, will they use this momentum, this very strong momentum pro-prosumer, or will they steal the thunder? And we talked a lot about this. It really needs the goodwill of them. They have done a lot, but if the member states don't want to push prosumers, one example is joint activity. That's very close to communities, but it is in the prosumer article. Jointly acting self-consumers. That means in one building, landlord to tenant, or flat owners in between each other. They have a PV plant on the roof. It doesn't really matter from the grid perspective whether it's one person generating and consuming, or if it's many people. The grid doesn't care. It is good for the grid if you consume it in the building. Unfortunately, there is this. It's written black on white that member states may treat one person self-generating consuming different from jointly acting self-consumers. Well, we have to see what the question is. Governance. From my point of view, there are governance issues from a consumer perspective, so the role of DSOs enabling active consumers, the data, demand response. Should DSOs be responsible for demand response, or is it the TSO or redispatch? Is it still the TSO or maybe the DSO? But from a consumer perspective, it's much more important to have an enabling regulatory framework. And enabling doesn't mean very empowering. It just means, please don't block active consumers by bureaucracy, and that's very important. Bureaucracy, technical requirements, financial burdens, fees, grid charges on prosumers. That's the big problem, and so that's for us. That's the focus, because the technology is cheap. PV storage is getting cheaper. EVs will get cheaper. Heat pumps are quite cheap. CHP, solar thermal, that's all cheap. It works, but it's not working if there are too many burdens on it. So we just need a neutral framework, probably. One word to digitalization, because it's always digitalization, smart meter, energy efficiency, energy transition. It is not like this. All the pioneering countries who are quite advanced in smart metering, it's very bad numbers. It's very bad numbers in all the countries. So it's not that easy. We are doing it now in Germany. We have a super smart meter that we want to export to the world. It's not really working. It's very tough. But we have to pay a lot more money. So smart metering, even the Commission has to rethink it a little bit. It's not the silver bullet as everybody thought it would be. It is not. The energy efficiency potential is very poor, and that's official numbers. So we have to. Of course, they are enabling all the business cases, the innovative business cases, no doubt, and for the smart grid. But it is not that easy, and it doesn't mean if you have hardware in your down there in your water flow, it doesn't mean that you win anything. You have to change your behavior. You have to switch your washing machine. You have to do that in the night or whatever. So that's more a communication challenge, education challenge, and not the technology is fine, but this gap, and we have to tackle that with smart meters, and not only hardware and that's it. That's a big issue. An outlook where we're going to, we will have these active consumers, and they will come sooner or later. If the framework is not very enabling, it will take more time. But I think we are going to a platform-based, but to platform-based business models. It might be Amazon or Google or whoever. They will do it. They will be aggregators probably. And I might register my heat pump, my PV, my storage on these platforms. In the States, we have bring your own device platforms. Right now it's bring your own thermostat. So they do demand response through the thermostat. But the direction is clear. It will be bring your own device, whatever brand it is. You go there and you say, and you register your air conditioning, your heat pump, your PV, your storage. And then there is a business case, and you might earn some money. The Americans are not so sensible with privacy. I'm not sure whether this will be as successful in Europe, because it is very privacy critical, of course. But if you do it transparent and you tell everybody you can earn some money, but we need your data, and we have real-time data, and we work with it, that's all fine. GDPR. You have personal data, you have to be transparent, you have to ask for consent, and then you do the business model. Where's the problem? So platform-based business cases is probably the future. And that's a lot of pros and a lot of cons. And whoever will do that. But we are looking to the energy future in a very positive way. The Clean Energy Package is a big one. I didn't expect it to be like this. I thought it was only marketing, new deal for consumers, active consumers. But it is a big thing. We need goodwill by member states. Maybe we need pressure on policymakers. But I think prosumers, individual ones, and communities too, will play a certain role, not only them. Of course, we have a lot of players, but active consumers, prosumers will be very important.
Thank you so much, Holger. I don't want to pronounce again your full name. I prefer to keep the essence. Catwin.
Yeah, that's fine.
but cut the win. But you raise also very interesting and identify very interesting points of this new model, particularly the active consumer, the prosumer, some of the challenges that we're going to see in the future. But also you raise a question that what about if some member states decided not to open up the prosumers possibility? Well, as you know, this is also a big challenge in legal terms, because from one side, the member states have the opportunity, according to the principle of subsidiarity, to organize their own market, but from the other side, this is the direct effect in the directives also counts a lot. I think it would be very difficult in this case, but also very interesting to raise the question
maybe only one additional information, because these prosumer articles, 15, directive and 21 yes. Renewables. It is quite tough. There is no financial burden on self-consumed energy. You cannot, because in Germany we do it from 10 kV. So unless there is a support scheme that is efficiently in all this. So there are vague legal terms, but it is black on white. It is it's very difficult for member states to go around this. It's not, it's far-reaching, and there are only these vague legal terms, also in community articles. That is the loophole probably, because it's proportionate, non-discriminatory, cost-effective, all this. This is the open door for member states who don't want to do it.
Correct.
It is open to monitoring, and they have to do, and that's black on white, they have to do an enabling framework for self-consumption. That's correct. That's written in the article.
That's correct.
They can say this is enabling, and we say it's not. But they have to do it. They have to monitor it. They have to assess potential and barriers. That's a tough one.
Yeah, but exactly. This is the title precisely of the directive, that it was the former one, promotion of this type of technologies, and I think it inspired the whole text and all the provisions of that within it. But also to illustrate about perhaps this and many other things, we have a professor of energy law from the University of Trento, Giuseppe, you have now the floor. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for inviting me to this workshop. And I think that, the speakers this morning and also my fellow panelists really did a good job in showing the complexity of local governance. So as an academic, I can only add further complexity, so no solutions, but more questions. And I will keep it short. I have some slides, but I will keep it short. And there is mainly an idea I would like to discuss with you, that is, what is exactly the meaning of local governance and what is the source of all this complexity we are discussing here. And there is this answer that I will try to explain, which is institutional complementarity, which means that in practice it is a complementarity across levels. So we talk about local governance, but in practice we are talking about the whole system. And of course, Mr. Ristori already told us that the local level will play a crucial role, but just to back him with some numbers, here you can see a graph from a report which was presented last year in the Climate Summit in San Francisco. And the good news from this graph are that if we take the commitments by the states ratifying the Paris Agreement in their nationally determined contribution, plus the commitments made in the most important transnational initiatives, and they are usually multi-stakeholder initiatives, so with a strong drive from the local level, we are on the safe path as a planet. That is, we can save the planet simply because we can land in an area which is below 2 degrees Celsius, or even in an area which is quite close to 1.5. Okay, so here are the good news, but then come the bad news. And the bad news are that behind these numbers, there are very strong assumptions. And these assumptions are assumptions about how to exploit all this potential at local level. That is, the local level could be able to really produce very significant results from the point of view of mitigation, reducing greenhouse emissions, but only if some kind of complementarity with the other levels is engineered. And here comes, of course, the problems. How exactly this institutional complementarity can be engineered? Can we really put in place some frameworks, and there are also legal frameworks or governance frameworks more broadly to exploit this potential? Well, we have a very short time, so I cannot go too much into the details, so I will just pick up one example of institutional complementarity that, in my views, is important and to some extent is also a reaction to what Josh and Holger said before. And you know that now we have the new local actors, and we have to try to understand exactly what role they could play. And at the same time, we can see that the energy communities will be involved in a very dense web of relationships. So you can already see here, and I think that I can share this point about multi-level governance with Martin, you can already see here that in practice, the role that the energy communities are going to play will depend on how they organize the governance, the relationships, the interplay with all these players. Okay, and they are, of course, located at different levels also. Okay, so it will be horizontal coordination, but also vertical coordination, and maybe also diagonal coordination that is across different levels. And of course, if we look at the same governance problem, that is how to ensure that coordination across levels takes place, we can also look at the same problem, but from the perspective of the distribution system operators. Okay, it is a pity that we don't have a representative for the distributors, but clearly one of the key issues will be the relationship between the energy communities and the distributors. And I really hope that we are not going to see in the next decade a clash between the energy communities and the traditional utilities, like the distributor system operators. Okay. Clearly, there will be some kind of competition. Okay. But my hope is that it is possible also to manage this kind of relationship in a more cooperative way. And to some extent, the clean energy package suggested or tried to manage this relationship, introducing some rules which point to a specific role for the distribution system operators, that is a neutral market facilitator. But at the same time, whenever the distribution system operators are asked by EU legislation, by the new EU legislation, to be a neutral market facilitator, well, there are some derogations which can be introduced. So it is not still clear exactly what the role of the distribution system operators will be in the new landscape, very crowded with by the new local actors. Okay. So if you look, for example, at what big consultants, like, for example, Ernst & Young, this is a proposal which comes from an Ernst & Young report for Euroelectric, and they say that, well, the distributor system operators will have to perform several tasks in this new landscape for the next decades, and this means that will be center stage, they will have center stage in this new low carbon transition. But what about their relationship at this point with the local actors? Not so clear. And of course, we can also say that the energy communities themselves can become distributed system operators. Okay, I think that this is true both for the citizens' energy communities and for the renewable energy communities. Okay, maybe with some differences. We don't have time to discuss this. But, well, this means that there will be competition also on their side. So, given that we are still waiting to see what could be the role of the local actors and the role of the traditional actors, we badly need institutional complementarity. Okay, without any kind of coordination, we won't have any successful transition. And what I mean by institutional complementarity maybe can be understood better if we focus on a specific example. Okay, this is just one example, but I think that the new landscape is full of institutional complementarities to be explored. But my example is very briefly this one. The new energy communities are going to trade energy in new and unusual way, in non-traditional ways, and a lot of energy trading and energy sharing could take place in the next few decades. Okay, maybe with new technologies, with a lot of digitalization, with new platforms, with blockchain technology, and so on. Okay, so it is in practice like a big experiment with net energy metering, and also virtual net energy metering, which is even an extension, a broadening of this kind of energy sharing. Okay, now supposing that this could be a very strong advantage, that is innovating in how energy is traded and innovating through the local actors, there are some big issues, however, to be addressed. And these big issues are issues about the complementarity between the traditional energy system and the new energy sharing, energy trading system that we would like to put in place. Supposing that it is one of the ways we want to exploit the potential of local governance. Okay. And all these opportunities are now available thanks to the clean energy package. Okay, so at least the enabling environment authorizing these kind of solutions is there. Then, of course, we need to work out the details. And one important detail is, of course, how exactly the financial flows between the energy communities and the distribution system operators should be designed. And in theory, we already have in the new Renewables Directive an important guiding principle, okay, that is remuneration for the prosumers, okay, something has to be paid them when they produce electricity, but according to which criteria? What amount of money they are entitled to? Well, remuneration according to market value, but also taking into account the long-term value that they provide to the grid, the environment, and society. Okay. Now, it is not clear whether this will be the guiding principle for all the net metering system in Europe, for all the energy communities. I hope so, but well, we will probably see a lot of debate about this, because after all, we have some big trade-offs here. That is, the higher the remuneration which is given to the prosumers, and the higher could be the cost for the system or for the consumers who are not active consumers and who are not prosumers. Okay, so we have an inefficiency from the point of view of economic efficiency problem, but also a fairness problem here. And of course, we are not alone with this problem in Europe. There is also a big debate on net metering in the USA. And of course, this is exactly my point. That is, the debate is exactly about institutional complementarities. Okay, it's not just about the amount of the remuneration to be paid to the prosumers. This is important. But then the remuneration will also depend on many other institutional details. But these details matter. For example, the structure of the retail tariffs, or the powers of the regulators, or, for example, the kind of subsidies that are available for renewable sources, and so on. All these aspects will matter and will have an impact on how exactly the cost and the benefits of the new energy trading system will be distributed. Okay, and of course, also from a comparative point of view, context will matter a lot. For example, also in Latin America and in the Caribbean countries, we know that they did implement net metering systems, net energy metering systems, but with a completely different structure because there were local needs. For example, cash payments were preferred simply because of liquidity problems, raising other kind of problems for the distributors, however. And of course, also, the level of compensation was lower because the low income in this country also justify the investments also with a lower remuneration. So in practice, my point is that local governance is mainly about addressing institutional complementarities, and addressing institutional complementarities means addressing big trade-offs. Okay, and we can only understand how to address these trade-offs, first of all, needless to say, with an interdisciplinary perspective, but also if we look at exactly at the kind of relationship that shall be established across the levels. Okay, so for example, Josh suggested that in a few decades we could have, or however, in a short time span, we could have more than 40% of prosumers. Okay, here is the big trade-off. Okay, that is how to distribute the system cost, supposing that we still need the distribution grids and also the transmission grids, and how to remunerate, to compensate the prosumers for the investment that they make and the communities for the investment that they make. Okay, so my tentative conclusion so far is exactly this. we badly need local governance to foster alternative business models, but at the same time, we cannot focus just on local governance and forget about the relationship with the other levels. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Giuseppe. I think there are a lot of questions that comes from your presentation, very also challenging from the economical point of view, from the business models, and also from the legal system. I think perhaps one of the characteristics of the transition period is that not only one system is being developed during this time frame, that it could coexist with another models and formulas. And I believe when we talk about the clean energy package, we said we singularize that a single package, only one. Perhaps inside of this umbrella legislative system, there are some more than one single package, even though we have to read and to make an interpretation in a very coherent way. So respecting the strategies, the policies, and the objectives that there are behind. So I do believe there are very interesting elements for Q&A session. So we are going to open it now. There are some questions. Questions, please. George.
Well, it's more an invitation to comment on a commentary. This ambiguity that has been clearly illustrated concerning some basic concepts and the rights and duties associated with each one of these new local entities is typical of the ambiguity of the European Union construction. When politicians cannot agree on a detailed enough definition, then they leave it as it is. Here, the case with a high level of ambiguity, which probably means that it will take a long time until the praxis will establish some rules for the correct application of these new concepts, taking into account the need to achieve a balance between efficiency and equity, and also to have a dynamic process, not just looking at the system as it is today, but also looking into the future as looking at what the goal is, and therefore asking which kind of incentives could take us from here to there. And this brings us really to the core of this seminar, which is the idea that maybe if a group of willing people come together and agree voluntarily on a set of coherent principles and definitions, this could help different governments to apply these concepts in a coherent way. We are talking about the local realities, and the principle of subsidiarity has already been invoked, and we all agree with that. But on the other hand, we can very easily, if we take this, the application of this principle too far, we can easily build incompatibilities between these new local arrangements and other basic principles of the internal market, namely as regards the freedom of all the agents, the consumers, but also the producers, the investors. So that's just a reflection, listening carefully to you and to the description, to the accurate description that you have done of the FTSE concepts that we have, how to move further.
Thank you, George. Some reactions from the panel. Do you want to comment?
No, just a very short remark about subsidiarity. What is exactly the meaning of subsidiarity when we talk about implementing some kind of solution for the energy communities? Can we leave completely open the possibility, for example, to design the tariffs to be paid by the energy communities to the distributors, and the remuneration that the distributor should pay to the energy communities, to the prosumers. Well, we have very general principles that's true in EU legislation on this, but we also know that sometimes other bodies of EU law could apply, sometimes state aid law, sometimes also free movement laws, that is the treaty, the principles in the treaties. So I would like to see some work on this, that is, subsidiarity is important, but compliance with EU law from the point of view of the general principles to solve this problem of relationship should be important as well.
Yeah. And maybe even to add to that, equality, because essentially what this clean energy package does is it gives a level playing field for not just energy communities and prosumers to act on the market with other market actors, but an equal opportunity for all citizens across the EU to become prosumers or act in energy communities. And if I can participate in an energy community, but you cannot, simply because you lived in another member state and your government has a different view on that, that is not fair. So I think the question of subsidiary really comes into focus, not just with the distribution tariffs, because I think this really will, if you're looking, this is a package, but I mean, when we were going through this, you really just sort of see how long the road is with the national processes that will have to go in to developing these. And even in the US, the regulators, they've already started looking at cost-benefit analyses and trying to get prosumers away from traditional net metering, and you see the process is a very iterative, stepwise approach, and they don't have, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. They're just experimenting to try to match everything together. And I think we really will face some challenges here, because even in Article 16 of the electricity regulation, which is about distribution tariffs, you literally have two competing principles about telling DSOs they need to operate their networks more efficiently, and literally in the same sentence you have provisions which incentivize them not to operate their networks efficiently. So this really will depend on dialogues between different stakeholders at national level, and I think everybody has their role to play. And I think the regulators really will take on a strong role in trying to be the arbiter of these different interests. In the Renewables Directive, you have, it says national competent authorities shall conduct these cost-benefit analyses about what is a long-term benefit. Okay, I don't want the national government doing these assessments, because they will clearly be biased, but at least if you have the regulator, of course they will be biased too, but they will be governed by certain transparency requirements, participation requirements, judicial review requirements that are very important to maintaining the robustness of the process. And I think that will also need to be taken into account.
About DSOs in energy transition, I know that, I'm spoiled because in Germany we have 900 DSOs. I think we have 2,000 in Europe or something, so we have 900 still. DSOs and ETSO in Brussels, they say, we are the enabler of the energy transition. In Germany, not all the 900 are enablers of energy transition. Not even if few. Digitalization is a threat to them. So I'm a little bit critical with the role of DSOs in this context, and they should be unbundled, but of course in Germany they are not. They are not really unbundled, so they have to play a role because it's the distribution grid where everything takes place. All these activities, flexibilities, no doubt. But it shouldn't be too easy. Just give the DSOs the money, the data, and storage. They can do storage and whatever. It is a very important discussion, but it's not an easy discussion. And not all DSOs are superheroes for energy transition.
Thank you, Holger. And thank you, George. I think your comments were enough provocative. So, please, Paolo.
Yeah, I want to go back to Holger's presentation, also discussion we had last night over dinner. and it's mainly to do with demand response, which in principle, and is an analogy for, of course, prosumer, a very, very similar topic, which in principle is allowed even from the Energy Efficiency Directive, and now it's taken up by the Internal Market Directive. But there is strong opposition. In this case, mainly comes from retailers, TSO, and even if by law is allowed, very often in member state, technical regulation or grid codes prevent it to happen, because these are still controlled by incumbent utilities, mainly retailers, which don't like other market players, new kids on the block like aggregator coming in and playing a role, taking away the business, reducing demand on behalf of consumer or customer. So I think there is, sometimes there are, directives and political decision or articles which in principle seems to open the market, but the reality is very different, and the devil's lies in details. So I'm very skeptic of allowing exemption or derogation on national rules, and maybe a stronger push from Brussels to go and really force at every level, including grid codes or technical regulation, to be really opening the market.
Thank you, Paolo. Holger.
Just very quickly, well, you're completely right. One of my next blog posts will probably be called "Bureaucracy is Killing Energy Democracy," because it's a very subtle way to do it. It's not. It might be on purpose, sometimes it's not, but it is a fact. But the Commission is tackling that. It is, even though the terms are still vague, but there is no unproportionate administrative and technical requirements. That's the most they could do, but that is of course that is still open, but that is a good one, and you find that everywhere, communities, so they tackle that, but it is very important, and you're completely right, demand response is not taking place in Europe. In Germany it's not. France is probably advanced, but in Germany it's not at all, not at all.
Yeah, I would probably, I sympathize with your comment. I think, and Holger makes a good point. I think you need to distinguish between two technical aspects and administrative burdens. And when it comes to the technical aspects, historically speaking, all of these regulations and standards have been designed for the big centralized market players. So in that sense, we really, one of the things that makes this package so great is that it is breaking this dichotomy whereby just because you are smaller, you can be more efficient, you act, as an aggregator, you do different things, but it's still hard to access the balancing market because there are minimum bid sizes and stuff like this. These are arbitrary technical limitations which discriminate against smaller players. And the technology allows you to participate, but the standards that have been put in place militate against that or prevent that. So I think from at least from the community's perspective, this is not an issue between communities and bigger market actors. This is an issue between smaller market actors and the bigger market actors. But yes, when it comes to administrative burdens, even just trying to get a renewables installation connected to the grid, if you don't have a relationship with your DSO and you have to go to 10 different windows to get permits and licenses and all this sort of thing, it's just really difficult, and this is unnecessary. That's why in the Renewables Directive you have a one-stop shop, so that any project developer can just go to one place. It doesn't matter where it is, it doesn't matter what happens behind the window, but they don't have that burden anymore. And we would like to see this type of approach taking place for becoming a supplier. Technical administrative requirements to become a national supplier should probably be different if you are just local supply, inside a grid or locally. These are things we really need to unpack to make the level playing field more clear.
Giuseppe, do you want to say something?
Clearly, we are talking about very, very complex development, but just to clarify, I'm skeptical about too much centralization that is assuming that we can decide everything at EU level, because, this is, on one hand, is against what the treaties say about shared competences, and on the other hand, probably it is a top-down solution which is not going to work so much. And this is one point. too much centralization could be a mistake, so maybe we have to wait for some kind of experiments, an experimentation period taking place with several different solutions until we can identify the conditions under which each solution works. And on the other hand, I still hope that we are not going to see a battle between the old utilities and the new actors for market shares. This is not the point. The point is the one that I suggested, it is trying to develop a complementarity between the national commitments and the local action. So the smoother this relationship works, the better for all of us. There is no point in thinking that the only goal should be to displace the big utilities.
Sarah, do you want to?
I think we are facing a disruptive change, an evolution of the system, and obviously the interest of all the stakeholders must be looked after. But I'd like to give evidence to the positive relationship between stakeholders that are connected to the energy communities. For example, as a REScoop, we've participated to a project, a European project, REScoop Plus, which has been just closed his 3 years time. And in Utrecht last week, we were talking about the role of the members of REScoops, and we were talking about if it's true that the members consume less than normal consumers. And the result is that there is an evidence that they consume less. And the other issue is, why do they consume less? Do they consume less because they are a member of a community, or they have become a member because they were sensitive to the energy savings? And the answer maybe is both. Because as experience that we have and the other REScoops, the members trust the REScoop they belong to, and if the REScoop give them the opportunity to save energy, they trust their COP, and they realize they effectively improve their energy consumption. And this is something that is important for me for the relationship between REScoops and local authorities, because there can be an alliance towards the energy transition, towards the reduction of energy consumption, and even the limits or the barriers that can be faced with the DSOs or with all the stakeholders could be overcome together if every stakeholder understands the positive relationship. I think that we should look at the positive opportunity and to the new opportunity of services that can be sold to the partners.
Thank you, Sarah. Someone wanted to comment, react? Okay, thank you so much. Well, what is no doubt for me is that the new legislative package empowers the services to energy in all dimensions. So I think that is a new, very interesting and positive line, as you were saying. Philippe, do you have a question? No? Okay.
Thank you. The background of my question is the following. I think this local governance and capabilities is a great thing, and definitely is there, and we are here to make it happen in even better condition. One of the risks is the following: who is in the end responsible for the overall system? And if we have, the more actors we have, the bigger the risk is that in case of a major crisis, nobody really feels responsible for the whole system. Therefore, I have two questions. One, shouldn't we identify and list a number of market design options that we offer to the industry to opt in? 20 years ago, when we left the monopolies, nobody really knew how the market would structure itself. And there were 3 options for unbundling TSOs. Remember, single buyer, ISO, etc. Maybe today, with the capabilities, we can have more, but it's probably unlikely that we have as many options as we can imagine. Maybe we have 8 or 5 or 10. The second question is, what is your opinion on how should market rules and transactions rules be elaborated in the context of local energy communities and digitalized world?
Thank you, Philippe. Joshua?
Yeah, sure. So, two questions. The first one is I'm losing it, but I think in terms of the markets and how they are developed, I think it really depends on the activity. I mean, if you look, for example, at renewable energy projects, auctions and tenders, there is a clear evidentiary basis that energy communities are at the very least implicitly discriminated against by using auctions and tenders. That is just, there's data to show that, especially from the German experience. And there's data to demonstrate that in general with auctions and tenders. Smaller actors don't fare as well. And there are a lot of problems with auctions and tenders in terms of competition and predatory bidding and gaming the system and this sort of thing. So in that sense, I think there is a very clear way to design the market. I mean, if you look at public procurement, for instance, you have sustainability criteria that public authorities can use when designing their bids, and some of them have even used them in renewables. For instance, if they're tendering public land for development, in Belgium, you have municipalities that put, I would call them citizen-based criteria into those. So about how much of the local citizens can participate, what are the local returns and benefits for citizens going to be, these sorts of things. And local energy community projects have fared quite well on those. If you design a tender system that's just about cost efficiency and the lowest bid possible, there's no way you will get smaller market actors or communities in there. I think when you're looking at other areas, I'll use another example, development of local flexibility markets. I don't know, because we don't really have them yet. But what I'm happy is that we do have the acknowledgement of energy communities, and we have a general rule that there needs to be a level playing field. So, I mean, basically anybody should be able to get into this. I think in terms of the technical criteria, you probably don't need something for communities, you just need something for aggregation, because community projects tend to be quite small. But I think, again, if you go look at the administrative barriers, how do you become pre-qualified? What are your responsibilities? Are these necessary? I mean, I think it's just about having a view. You don't necessarily need to create a separate bike lane, that's what we call it, but it should be in the back of your mind that we need to consider these types of market actors when we're developing different markets.
Thank you, Joshua. I think implicitly you have also already answered the first question that was related to security of supply and safety measures by spreading the number of actors.
Yeah, my simple answer to that would be whoever's in charge of the government at the time. So if something really bad happens, of course the government is going to take control. But I think from an academic perspective, a word you'll probably hear more, and it's used in other contexts, is polycentric governance, and that is, there are lots of different actors involved.
Thank you.
Well, we heard here about the role that regulation should play in facilitating this transition. I just wanted to bring a sense of urgency, because this is not something that can wait or that we should fix in 2030 or 2050. And inaction is also one way of creating bad regulation. There are many examples of the dysfunctionality of the present system, but let me give you just one example of the inconsistency of our policies and regulation. Since the 1st of January 2019, all public buildings must be, new public buildings must be near zero energy buildings. So imagine that the European University Institute decided to build another department on the other side of the street in January, and the building is ready tomorrow and will be connected to the network. Now, by design, this new building must be a near zero energy building, which means that the price for that building includes extra investments that were made to make sure that that building will minimize the use of electricity from the grid. Now, that new building will pay exactly the same network tariffs that this building. Is this fair? Is this efficient? Now, from January to 2021, all new private buildings, households, must also be near zero energy buildings. You apply a certain rate of renovation of the building stock, and you realize that in 30, 40 years from now, all buildings will be near zero energy buildings. So the function of the grid must be, by definition, completely different from what it is today. But we are still giving the same incentives for the grid operators as we did 20 years ago. So this inconsistency is already there. We don't need to wait until 2030 to see the inconsistencies of the system. Now, the complexity of this re-regulation of the definition of the new regulatory model may frighten us. It's very complex indeed. But denying that the present system is already dysfunctional is not fair anymore and is not efficient, and above all, is not fit for purpose because it does not lead us to the policy goals that we have. I think that should be the starting point to start now, today, working on that and not waiting until the results of this dysfunctionality became too evident, too apparent.
Thank you so much, George. I think it was a very good example what you raised, this question of the directive on buildings and public procurement, also correlated, and it comes to the point that you already mentioned in your first question with regard to the need to establish convenient and basic or fundamental principles and references in terms of definition. We have 3 requests of questions. If you don't mind, we are going to give the floor to all of you, and then we have a final one from the table.
Thank you. So when we decided to have the live stream of the conference, we, at the same time, publishing the FSR website and as well in the social media, a poll to be answered for those who are not here, for make sure that we had we reach a public beyond this room today. So what I'm going to do now is to read the 2 questions that we received. And I think it was applicable to this roundtable. So the first question is, how will you ensure that our stakeholders are taking decision in favor of power grid, not for themselves or their organization, local bodies only? And the second question would be my hand seeking, I think in this sense. The second question would be, what could be the mechanism of participation and auditing that the population will have to evaluate the work done in this, and once you have decentralization? This is how I perceive. And I would take the chance as well to invite the persons in the room, to those who want to get access to the FSR website, Policy Dialogue. The first event is our event, and the pool is still open. So I would like to, in the next section, perhaps you could see how people voted, which proposal for the workshop would be more applicable, which is exactly, is still available to be answered. Thank you.
Well, thank you. My question really related to the same topic that Holger just addressed with his excellent example, and just made the point that the more successful prosumer policy and other local policies are, the less the local communities will rely on the central system, and hence the higher the premium will be to pay the grid costs for transmission grids and perhaps also distribution grids. So my question is really, is it foreseeable at some point that we might actually get increased conflicts of interests, essentially, in terms of paying tariffs, paying the transmission grid tariffs? And will someone perhaps opt out of the system? And if someone starts to opt out of the system, then it will be even more expensive for those remaining. So is that something we need to think about?
Philip, did you? No? Okay. Then Lihanche, please.
I just had one quick question for all of the panel looking at this brave new world. We see in the REScoop Directive there's still a role for public service obligations, even although price caps are supposed to be abolished at retail level. Do you think that these local energy communities or citizens' energy communities should have public service obligations placed upon them, or do we think it's a given that they will aspire to those kind of objectives? Thank you.
Very interesting question that I would also add in the energy services of the platform and the economies of the platform, that I think is a super interesting question. Okay, so we have a bunch of questions. Please, if you could be brief in the answers in order to go in time. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, so, wow, lots of questions. I'll try to bundle most of them into one general answer. And I think, again, it comes back to what I had said at the end of my first intervention. This comes to an issue of fairness, and this will increasingly dictate the progress, and I think it will be determined by how people see their lives progressing. Is this energy transition going to be about haves and have-nots, and is it going to increase the disparity to people who are already down on their luck and people who have the ability to invest? I think this will be an increasingly pressing question. Already you have issues about who pays for what. You have the biggest users of the energy system right now that are connected to the high transmission networks. They pay the least in terms of system costs. So now that basically means all of us, we are all paying the energy transition. And a lot of our members, at least their members, so the actual prosumers, currently they feel like they are enemies of the system because they don't feel that they are treated by DSOs and national decision makers as a part of the solution. And I think that the success of each DSO will depend on how they approach the problem. If they approach citizens as part of the problem, they will increasingly have more problems. If they see them as part of the system and they try to integrate them, and that's where the communities come in, because they are the ones that will incentivize the citizens to stay part of the system, because we are about solidarity and doing this together. We don't want to disconnect from the grid. We want to strengthen the grid, and we want to strengthen the benefits that go to all segments of society through this. And so I think, again, we will need to arbit what are the incentives versus what should everybody be paying in terms of their fair share. And this is going to, include everybody from the regulators to the DSOs and distribution charges to the taxes and levies. We will need to figure out how we are going to distribute all of these costs. I think when it comes to public service obligations, in general, if you cap prices, for instance, in France, it's much harder to become an alternative supplier because of these cap prices. But I think one of the things that we do bring to the table is social innovation. So whatever obligations you're going to place on an energy community, one thing you do need to realize is that they can socially innovate. They can create internal solidarity mechanisms. So they need to be allowed to do that. This is basically what they are designed to do, whether it's address energy poverty or people right now. One of our members You can donate parts of your energy bill to people who have a hard time paying their energy bill. This is what we want to see. But the communities need to be able to be empowered and given the space to design these sort of mechanisms. And then I'm not so worried we have these problems. But also the definition is very important, because if we have traditional market actors just trying to crowd themselves into the space, you have people who are not necessarily in it for the right reasons, and that will create tons of problems.
Just 2 short remarks. First point, who will ensure that the local stakeholders will also pursue a collective interest or a common interest? Which is also related to the other question that Philippe made about too much fragmentation with new actors in the energy system. I think that it is important that we avoid using the wrong concepts here, because some scholars talk about energy communities, describing them as kind of energy commons, that is some kind of local resource to be exploited. But it is the wrong concept, I think, because there are too many interdependencies and too many negative externalities to take care of. Okay, so all the impacts on the system has to be taken into account, which means that in practice, only regulation will be able to avoid local interest to damage the collective interest. Okay, which is an unpleasant message, I understand this, from the point of view of the energy communities, because it means that their internal governance also has to be regulated in a quite significant way. Okay, not so easy for the energy communities to accept this, but some kind of internal regulation will be also needed, and also external regulation, that is how the energy communities interact with all the other players. This is the first remark. And the second remark, well, indeed, there is a big issue about public service obligations, which is exactly the same debate taking place now in California about appointing a single supplier of last resort statewide. That is, given that energy communities have been growing a lot in California in the last few years, now the problem is who is the supplier of last resort for the areas of the state in which the energy communities control most of the supply. And it is still an open debate, because the California Public Utility Commission is pushing for a statewide supplier last resort, okay, just one utility, not an energy community, being appointed as a supplier last resort, but this solution is strongly opposed by the energy communities, because they don't want, again, a strong influence by the traditional public utilities. And clearly, this is the kind of debate that we should have also in Europe, but I fear that we still have to develop solutions. I don't have a clear solution for this, but this is the kind of debate we should have also in Europe. That is, what kind of public service obligation should be imposed on the energy communities. We already know that if they manage distribution systems, they have exactly the same obligations like other distribution systems, save for some exceptions in some cases. And the prosumers participating to the wholesale markets do have some balancing responsibilities as well. So from this point of view, we already have a solution written in the law. But we don't have many other answers for other aspects from the point of view of public service obligations.
I just wanted to confirm the most important challenge for all actors in all countries with advanced energy transition is a modern and fair and transparent system of charges, fees, levies, whatever. Unfortunately, the German minister just said till the next elections, 2.5 years, we won't touch that. But this is the biggest problem. All the countries are struggling with that. The states, you can do it very flexible, triggering flexibility, but then it's very complex, and probably nobody will do it. Or you could do it very easy, fixed tariff. Every prosumer pays €5 a month if he has storage or PV. It's easy, it might be successful, but it's not triggering flexibility, grid-friendly behavior. That is a research thing, and a lot of ideas, but Nobody has found the right solution yet. And the second big thing is really about fairness, and we had this desolidarization discussion in Germany, the small prosumers that only consume 1,000 kilowatt hours and the rest they do on their own. So the poor ones pay everything because they can't become prosumers. It's not that easy, but in general, it is a very important issue, and of course we have to include tenants and low-income households. That is the idea. There are some ideas, but because there is a huge potential. Of course they can do something. Tenants can do a lot. So that has to be tackled. They can be part of a community. They can have a battery storage in their flat, even though they don't have PV, but they can be part of the community. So a lot of ideas, and that's a big issue to really overcome this old discussion about desolidarization, because it's, yeah.
Okay, thanks so much to all of you, Giuseppe, Joshua, Holger, and for your contributions and your comments and presentations. So now we are going to have, before the last session, we are going to have a coffee break for around 10 minutes. Thank you.